Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome along to this Fusion21 webinar, Building a Safer Future, Navigating the New Landscape, the Golden Thread. Those of you that have been with us all week will know that this is the third in our series of webinars. And as we've worked our way through and navigated our way through the landscape, it's really good that we're here towards the end of that journey in what promises to be a really exciting next session in that series. Again, if you have been here before, you probably don't really need me to go through, but I will go through this little bit of housekeeping. So again, just to remind you, the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, you can minimize it to see more of the presentations by clicking on the orange button. If you are having any issues with the audio, again, you can adjust the settings here, though sometimes, as I always say, if those problems persist, it's often better to log out and log back in. That seems to solve most people's issues. And again, you, the audience, are on mute and will remain so for the next hour. But we do want you to ask any questions, and please therefore use the question box again on your panel to ask any questions or make any comment in relation to what you're about to hear. So as I said, this is the third in our series of webinars, and it was very clear that during the course of both the presentations we've had before, that the whole issue of data, how it's collected, how it's used, and how that fits in with these changing landscape and emerging strategies is a key component to ensuring that you've got a strategy fit for purpose going forward. And so therefore, as a result of that, I'm delighted that we've been able to get Jack White to join us. Jack is the technical manager at Clarion Housing Group. I want to say one of the largest, I think probably the largest social landlord, certainly in England, and Jack has been leading a really exciting project, which I will leave him to explain, and also delighted that my colleague Phil Woodhead, category manager at Fusion21, is also with us, and he'll speak after Jack. So without any further ado, let's get to the main source of why you've turned up, so to speak, and welcome, Jack, and over to you. Hopefully you will have control now of the presentation. And welcome. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Yes, so hopefully I'm going to speak to you a bit today about the golden thread, what we've Clarion called Project 4D, though that could well change. It's I think in this kind of new and innovative area, we're never quite settled on what we're doing. We're always looking to improve and change, so that one definitely could. I'll not dwell on this part too long. This first slide, it's just going over the background, and yeah, it just Hackett report came out and set the kind of scene of what it is that we need to be doing. So we need to be keeping a digital record regarding buildings, collect and maintain information regarding them to ensure the kind of safe management. Must have a duty holder, and they must identify gaps in information, and that's got to be done throughout the life cycle of the building, where we will then go on to provide information to the regulator. So what is Project 4D? So we've given it 4 Ds to try and make it, you know, partly give people the idea of creating a 3D model to help us visualize things and further data, but also we've defined 4 different Ds to give it that name. So dynamic, this isn't something that we go to a building, do a bit of work, and that's it done. It's got to be near real time. It's got to keep up to date with the changes that happen to that building. So it's got to be digital, but by that we don't just mean on a CD and then in someone's desk. It's got to be fully digital, and it's accessible to the stakeholders who need to access it. Dimensional, so we know exactly where everything is. We've got a much better understanding and accuracy, and that leads on to the data part, which bringing all those together, accurate, in-depth and relevant information is really what we're looking for. And then on the right there's just a little snip from Clarion's annual report. I think it probably could be a lot of housing associations, but the bottom one is probably the key here. So we want Clarion's decision-making process to be rapid, decisive and data-driven. And so, we feel we're ticking all the boxes with that. So just a kind of a little thought exercise, if you like. So how tall is this building? So we're thinking here, why do we need to do this? And so this question, I feel, gives us quite a good indication as why we need to do this. So firstly, what is a building? Is this a single building here in this picture? Is it 2 buildings? The kind of left-hand side with the lighter brown facade and the right-hand side with the darker one. Is it 4 because there are 4 different access points? So what is it? What is a building when we talk about a building? How is building height measured? So are we looking at something where this is 9 stories? Is it do we talk in stories? Is it number of floors? So that there's a basement area there. So is it 10 floors? Is it the height in meters to finished floor level? Is it total height of the building? And does that change across the number of buildings? So the information we'll need to provide will change according to the stakeholders, and so we need a much better understanding of our buildings to be able to give accurate and correct answers. And this is what should if you're speaking to someone outside of housing seem quite a straightforward question, but actually when you look at this, it becomes quite complicated, and that's true across quite a lot of the work we do. So it's this type of question, which means we need a Project 4D. Just try and quickly explain perhaps the differences between what we're trying to do and BIM. So BIM is more covers the area of construction, whereas what we're looking at is asset management. So that golden thread right across the life cycle of the building, and also creating that golden thread for existing assets and not just new builds. So where BIM is a kind of a point for client, contractor and designer to share information and kind of improve our workflow. Project 4D is a kind of ongoing sharing of data between internal and external teams. The outputs again are quite different. For BIM, you'd get a project handover to a client. You would get what would then be a static 3D model. Obviously it's dynamic through the process of creating it, but that's kind of finished. So what we want to do is take that model and ones for existing buildings and make that dynamic. So having a relational database behind that to keep up to date with the changes, which across a number of fires like Grenfell or Lacanau, it's those changes across the life of the building that can really affect the safety for those within them. That being said, standards are the same. It is a lot of crossover here, but there are again differences. terms of BIM, it's something that's been done for quite a while now, and there's many suppliers. Whereas for what we're doing, we don't feel there's currently anything in the marketplace that offers the complete solution for us. Again, this is just one to kind of help give a kind of analogy of that to help kind of explain it. So we feel that that BIM would be like getting passed across a library with books set out in geodecimal systems. So you can see, I think here that 914 dot whatever is books about Istanbul, whereas 915 dot something is books about Turkey, and who the author was when it was done. So it's great in terms of creating that information, but what we're looking for is something that will track who has that book checked out currently, who's had it before, how many of them do we have, do other libraries have it if they don't have it. So it's creating that depth of dynamic information. Again, why perhaps in a bigger picture, giving you a little kind of snippet, is hitting that golden thread of digital data. For larger organisations like ourselves, where we maybe used to have very localised stock. If we're to function as a national landlord, we need really good data to help make sure we're functioning well. I think one of the key ones for us is to allow assurance as well as compliance, so that we're not just ticking boxes. We really understand our data, and we can go back and interrogate that to make sure that we're really confident in what we're saying, and how it will underpin our safety case. So it's that understanding of our assets, so allow prioritisation of works, understanding of components that we've got in them within our stock to allow the right resources first time, and again, that's really key to ensure no lesser downtime, and then when we do replace, it's replacing with the right things. And again, quicker and cheaper programming, so we don't, we're not having to go out to survey to see what fits into, we've got all that information to hand, and we can move ahead with our programs. And again, just one last bit on the kind of difference between or reason for looking strongly at existing buildings. Certainly for Clarion, if we were to deliver 50,000 homes in the next 10 years and sell off 25,000 units, come 2033, we still wouldn't have data for 2/3 of our properties. So it just highlights the importance of looking at existing buildings. That being said, we are working alongside our development team, who are creating processes to ensure that the buildings that they hand over to us have that golden thread of information. So talk a little bit about what we've done so far. So we want to take learnings from previous things myself and the rest of the team have worked on, and I think one of the phrases we like is an informed client is a good client, and so we want to really understand what it is that we're talking about, and so we've tried to do a lot of the work ourselves. That's not necessarily to say that going forward we won't outsource it, but when we do, we'll understand what the requirements are, how to go about it, what's really necessary when we're say working with Fusion21 or whatever and looking at specs or things like that. But so the work we've done so far is been out and done laser scanning for a number of buildings. We've done modelling of our assets in Revit, been out to survey and capture the type of data that we want, and then we've been speaking to industry to try and develop that solution that I talked about in terms of a relational database. We're trying to focus on potential to scale up. We know that we have a number of buildings that are classified as HRBs at the moment, but we know that the definition of an HRB might well change, and we might need to expand what we're doing. So we're keeping that in mind, and communicating with others around the business and externally to make sure that what we're doing fits in with other stakeholders. So the processes that we've kind of developed at the moment are those four that I just mentioned, really. So what we're looking to do is go out to a site and do laser scanning of that site, which creates a point cloud, which a point cloud is dots in a 3D space. So you've got your X, Y, and Z coordinates and lots of dots within that. We then take that point cloud and take it into some architectural software. So Revit's what we've been using to create a solid model that contains elements such as doors, walls, windows, etc. We then go out on site to do surveys, and we collect that information and put that against the tags of those assets within the models. And then we're working towards having a relational database that will allow us to interrogate that data, both looking at our models and within a database. So what we've had to do to try and allow this, as I kind of highlighted before, what is a building? So we have looked at our asset hierarchy and thought it doesn't quite work for what we're looking to do. And so here is an example of what we're looking to do. So this is Gladstone Place, one of our estates. So we have come up with a coding for an estate, and then we've got an area in red, which is one building, an area in blue, which is another building. So we've separated them out into blocks. And then within those, we have individual cores. So we're looking at areas with kind of continual accessibility there, to understand, if there was a fire in a specific property, you wouldn't be going into any of those door entrances. It would be for specific ones, and whether it be smoke systems or whatever, what is functioning in specific areas. So we've done that, and then we're looking at what floor something is on, and then in that floor, what type of area is it? So it's a communal area, and then what is the function of that? So for we've got a first stairwell in the bottom section of the drawing there, and then for that stairwell, we're talking about a specific component, and in this case, it's an entry door. And you'll forgive my coding bit running into my picture there, but hopefully I'll just show you. So then that will come up with a length of code, which for anyone who understands how we've come up with it will define exactly where that part of the asset or component is, and will also appear within our 3D model. But then for that piece of coding, we've got a list of pieces of information that we want to capture about the component, but we also want to know what has happened with that. So we want a log of the interactions that we've had with that. So whether it's a repair, an installation, a test, anything like that, we want to capture that. And so we've got historical record of what's happened across the building at all the different elements. So that's just then setting out, this is our asset hierarchy that we see working for the work that we're trying to do here. So then getting into the bit that it's a lot of fairly tedious data talk that I find interesting, but I know a lot of people don't. But this is a little part just to say the kind of work we've done. So it's, as I said, we have been out with laser scanners. We've found that mobile scanners rather than static terrestrial scanners allow us to do it really quickly. We've brought in-house a BIM coordinator to allow us to do some modelling. And we've now got, or we've started creating an app that will allow us to get that consistency of survey across the blocks that we're looking at. And as mentioned, we don't yet have a product that will allow us to demonstrate all this functioning together. That being said, so this is the point cloud. So this is an estate that we have, and this is the point cloud data. And then this is it turned into an architectural model. And in that, we've done scans of the externals and scans of different archetypes of flats, and then worked up those archetypes. And then, as I mentioned, with that, the coding system, attaching that to different elements within the model that we've created. And we just really see that being something that will allow us to really have an in-depth understanding of our blocks and save us a lot of time and effort. So yep, how will this help? So compliance, golden thread, speaking to the regulator in future, we'll have, we'll know exactly what's at our buildings, what's happened to it, what the changes have been over time, history of tests, etc. We'll know exactly when works need to be done, when something was installed, so when it might need to be replaced. And then when speaking to residents, it will give us the opportunity to provide a lot of different things for them. So it could be to demonstrate how they might evacuate their flat, or a range of different things. So how will it help in terms of operations? So what difference will it make to the business? So this is a complaint from a previous project that I worked on, which is a cladding replacement project, and this is obviously not something I want to be kind of shouting about, but it's an area where we've where Clarion has not done as good a job as we'd have liked, and so we've had a door. So if you look at the top right picture, it looks like everything's okay there, but in fact the door on the left, the door in the picture on the left hand side of it there, does not have any glass in it, which was always a bit strange when I was on site and you would go out there and you would just walk through this door, but that's how it was. Anyways, our process in terms of identifying which door that was in the block, what were the issues that we had with it, and how it needed to be addressed, weren't done properly, weren't available, and it meant that it took a lot of time. And the final solution that you can see at the bottom there is something that no longer functions, for its purpose, and also has resulted when we do go to repair it, we can't, because there's been drilling going through the door frame, so we'll need to replace the whole door set rather than just the glass panel within. Next one is more just, again, that's a real life example from some of my previous work, but this one is more of a theoretical one. But so when we're talking about repairs, we've got our systems wouldn't be able to tell you how many lights we've got in a specific building necessarily. We've got different responsibilities for it. So obviously the picture on the right is emergency lighting, the picture on the left is not, and we would have different contractors to go out to fix it. But at the moment we wouldn't know without going out on site who should be turning up. and then what do they need? You know, is it an LED? Is it a compact fluorescent? You know, getting all that information in one place to ensure, you know, emergency lighting in the event of a fire is functioning, you know, is critical. So what's on the horizon that's you know, helping certainly get buy-in from the business to help us push this forward. Fire Safety Act, building safety regulators coming, so you know, we know that we'll need to provide this information or you know, provide what information is asked for by the regulator to continue to have residents in our buildings. That's the building assurance certificates there. And then, as I mentioned or touched on earlier, you know, we know that there might well be changes to this that mean we need to expand the work that we're doing. So I think this is just a quick overview of the kind of what we see as the progress made so far. So we know that what we've done, or what our idea was, can be done. You know, creating models of our buildings, you know, having tags for parts of the assets and the components within that, and attaching data to that. We're currently in the progress of trying to trial that, but we certainly, I think, you know, the last part is roll out and beyond. We see it, you know, potentially being able to offer much more than we currently do. So what we kind of try and, again, another analogy to throw in, this is on the right hand side there, this is Martin Cooper of Motorola with the first ever mobile phone. He used it in the 1970s to call up a rival and brag that he was calling him off a mobile phone. And then move on to the Motorola XTC 8000. I can't quite remember, but it's the first ever commercially available mobile phone, which took, I don't know, 10 hours to charge, I think, and you got about 30 minutes of you know, call time. But what we're looking at is you know, more thinking about a smartphone and opening up a whole range of things where it's not necessarily just a phone. So we might think it might not necessarily deal with just safety, but would allow us to kind of you know, bring in Internet of Things as we really understand our buildings, or help with a whole range of things that we might not even be able to kind of you know, conceive ourselves at the moment. I think that is it. So thanks, and over to Phil, I think.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jack, for that. That was really insightful in terms of how your project is developing. The bad news is I'm old enough to be able to admit that my first ever mobile phone was one of those Motorola's, which I actually still think I've got somewhere up in the attic. You never know. It may be. It may start to be worth something one of these days. Anyway, enough of my wittering on. And yeah, as you said, let's hand over to Phil.
Thanks, Jack, and thanks, Andrew. I just want to talk very briefly about our new building safety and compliance framework, which launches on Tuesday. I think I've only got a couple of slides. I'm hoping that I found Jack's presentation really interesting, so I'm going to take the opportunity to ask some questions myself, and I'm going to put my hand up and say I think my first telephone was a Nokia 3210, so you can probably age everyone from their mobile phones. But in terms of for my piece, and next slide please, Andrew, I reflected on Jack's presentation a little bit, thinking about when we set up our new framework, and you know, there's been a year's worth of work gone into to produce that. So you've got to remember at the time that we're writing specifications and thinking around the needs of our members, you know, the consultation on Grenfell sort of in its infancy, and we don't have all of the answers at that point in time. So we're sort of doing a bit of stargazing, but one of the things that we're always trying to do is make sure that our frameworks are relevant, that they're fit for purpose. that they will adapt to changes in future. So we take lots of advice, etc., etc. And you'll see on the next slide the sort of fire safety lots within that, and lot 5 is specifically around multidisciplinary fire safety experts, whether that's fire risk assessors for HRRBs or fire engineers. And we did have this discussion around data. I think one of the early pilots for the golden thread, you see people in the West Midlands, they've had their buildings fully LiDAR scanned and they've got this really great fancy model, and you think, okay, but actually when you think about that, the solution isn't just a computer tech. Actually what you're going to need is surveyors to interpret that information, technical people, and we certainly took the view, we think our members want a full solution and not just part of the solution. So you'll see that lot 5 there isn't aimed specifically at technology only companies. It's actually people that are probably, and our steer was, we're looking for multidisciplinary teams of skills, people that have got fire engineers and surveyors and clerk of works and some BIM LiDAR scanning, whatever it might be, that can meet a range of member needs. So I suppose that's my first sort of observation. We did take a fresh look, so we updated our specs, we've updated the pricing documents, the KPIs, really to make sure that the tools are in those frameworks to help our members manage their contractors, manage their supply chains, and deliver assurance of compliance. So that's pretty much the key messages for me. On the next slide, thanks Andrew, you were just about there. Just a whistle-stop tour to the lots within the framework. I haven't included here, and the framework is building safety and compliance, so it covers a range of compliance. So I haven't shown sort of asbestos, Legionella, the electrical testing, the warden call, that type of stuff. So this week is focused on fire safety. As I said earlier, lot 5 is targeted around those complex high-risk buildings. We know that those skills are at a premium and a shortage, and no one can justify that sort of skill on every single building that they own at that sort of level. So lot 6 is more and we've pitched a minimum bar here at level 3 assessors and above. So that's sort of where lot 6 comes in. Lot 7 we talked about earlier in the week in terms of block inspections, fire door inspections. Lot 8 and 9 is sort of comfort territory for us. We've done this for a number of years now, and the opportunity with the new framework is to learn from what we've done over the past few years. Those contractors that are more specialist at doing fire doors, and those that are more specialist at fire stopping, and those people that want to do both, and hence we've separated that out. And then lot 10, active fire safety, and the opening the door within that to things like the self-testing emergency lights, and the fire alert evacuation systems. So whistle stop tour, if you would like to know more about that new framework, it launches. We're very excited after a year's worth of work on Tuesday. Dial in at that point and we'll tell you a bit more about the framework. So that's enough of me.
Okay, thanks very much. Again, just a reminder to the audience to keep sending your questions in. So yeah, happy to see those on the answer. And I'm going to start with a question, principally for you, Jack, which is just around in terms of deciding what data to collect and to some extent how to collect it. Is it all new, or have you gone back to existing records and so on and use both collecting new data and then a supplementary question to that is how do you intend to keep it up to date, particularly in terms of a contractor will go and using the example of the light, we'll do a repair. How does it sort of get updated in real time?
Yeah, so I think probably the first point worth mentioning here is I think our data is probably in line with the rest of the sector, so not where we'd like it to be, and something I like to focus on when it sometimes seems like there's a lot of work to do here is we might not, you know, we're doing something new and it might not be perfect, but it's a step change in terms of what we do have. So certainly what we've kind of done so far is, you know, think about the different, so I think we've got a list of about 50 different parts of the asset and components that we think make up its, you know, fire and structural safety. And then we have thought about what information it is that we would like to capture about that. Now, some of that will come from existing sources, and some of it will come from surveying, and some of it will just go in as unknown. You know, there's no way to actually capture it currently. We're hoping that with time it will then be that will be replaced, and you know, we're hoping that as part of contracts for people working on our HRBs, they will be required to give us the information that we set out that they need, and that will be passed across and updated into our system. So we don't necessarily have you know, different ideas for HRBs, whether it's, you know, permits to work or things like that, which could allow us to kind of control, you know, who's on site and what data we get. But it's, you know, because it is quite a new area, it's not something where we've said or we've got an idea and we say that's definitely going to be it. I think, you know, we need to be flexible. You need to work with others and make sure we're working in a way that you know, fits with what they're trying to do. You know, fire safety isn't the only thing there, you know, only part of people's jobs. So we need to work with others. So we will try and adapt across time to do as best as we can, but bearing in mind that, you know, we are a step change, hopefully, in terms of, you know, struggling to tell you how many stories our buildings are to, you know, whether or not that's an emergency light and what type of light it is, whether, you know, how long the battery within that emergency light lasts. You know, if we don't quite get there, we'll at least be you know, a fair bit along the way, hopefully.
Okay, thanks. And Phil, just sort of associated to that around sort of, you know, members' requirements in terms of and advice around that sort of whole issue of data collection. And clearly not everybody might be able to provide the investment that Clarion has, but there are clearly still, however, minimum requirements in terms of that data collection. What are such, you know, some of the things or you know, some of the points that you might want to provide by sort of way of advice?
It's a really interesting question, because as Jack was talking, I actually thought back to a project, and I don't run so many projects myself anymore, but tendering Clarion's fire alarm contract, let's say just pre-merger, and you sort of seeing these different data sets coming from different organisations, and to be fair to Clarion, it wasn't bad. You know, you get columns with make and model and how many detectors, but that's about as far as it gets. Now, from a procurement perspective, actually in terms of a contractor being able to assess what work is involved, we've got geographies, we've got postcodes, actually wasn't bad. You know, we do see members out there that they can just about give you a list of buildings that they think that they have fire alarm systems in. And so I think that's the old world, if we use the mobile phone analogy, the sort of Motorola's, and there are still people that are there. I think the first step, you can go, I'm going to say you can go nuclear, you can go straight to make that jump. I think the challenge for many other providers, and Jack's point out there, is a lot of these software to do that doesn't actually quite exist. I think there is, the technology exists, but the providers and the platforms don't. So you're going to be very much finding your way and inventing things, which is very expensive if you're relatively small. So I think for most people, actually, that might be a couple of years away, might be out of reach. So in the meantime, I think there are very tried and tested, established ways of demonstrating compliance assurance. And for most people, it is probably starting with that. And it comes down to, if you don't know, talk to your contractors, because they almost certainly do. If they don't, you could employ a team of surveyors to go around capturing assets and do that. And you know what? That's not a bad thing to do. We had a London local authority not too long ago, and before they went to tender for all their 100 corporate buildings, actually that was one of the discussions we had, and said, you know what, you've got the time, go and do your asset capture. But actually to go and talk to your existing suppliers and get the asset registers from them really gives you a starting point. But if you, we don't see many people at that point in the journey anymore in the housing world, particularly after Grenfell. We're now 3 years on, and I haven't seen that in a while. I think most people do have a good feel for what are their assets, what are they doing. I think it then comes down to really thinking around the information you need, how are you going to use that. And I've actually got a question for Jack here, because, and it sort of touches on a point you said, Andrew, because you know, let's use the mobile phone analogy. I've got myself a smartphone here, and we know that the technology is getting cheaper. So smartphones go to the next generation, the latest phones, they can do LiDAR, they can do distance scanning, they can build point clouds. Do you think that you will get to a point where any time a person, an engineer, an operative goes and does some work on your buildings, that they will be scanning the room before and afterwards, and using that to build up a point cloud in real time, so that your data is constantly growing and evolving? And then I suppose if that is the vision of where you think you might get to, two supplementary questions: at what point do you think you might get to that? And then secondly, have you had any considerations on data storage? Because I'm thinking that's a lot of data. So.
Yeah, I mean, excellent question. Yes, I mean, it's certainly something we've spent a lot of time thinking about. You know, there are a lot of options in terms of, you know, how you model your building. You know, more along the lines of photogrammetry, which I think you're more talking about there, where you've got, you know, more of a kind of rendered and kind of mesh point cloud. And I think we've kind of thought more that we will, you know, create these structures in architectural software, and then just, you know, we'll be able to say, you know, if that's the door set in the architectural software, actually we've changed the door, but rather than doing anything necessarily to adapt that the model, you know, there is a picture taken on site to say, you know, this is it. You know, we already get that coming in. If we, you know, install a new fire door, we get a picture of it, you know, and that just has a natural place to sit in a system. So it's almost that this architectural model is a framework for kind of, you know, data. It obviously does more than that in terms of it gives us that kind of, you know, a chance to validate, you know, more assurance. But I certainly think that, you know, what you're describing there is certainly where we'll be heading more towards. Whether it's, you know, I guess it's a question of time. You know, is it really worth, you know, when someone's in there gathering all that information, or is just a picture of a before and after, say, of the work they've done? Is that enough? And I would probably suggest it is, but you know, I certainly wouldn't be sticking anything of value, and I'm wrong very regularly. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that. We've got a couple of questions recently come in, and yes, please do keep sending your questions in. So one of the questions that I think is directly for you, Jack, are the systems flexible enough to identify vulnerable residents, i.e. where PC FRAs are required?
So, I mean, for this, for the work that I'm doing, is focusing mostly on the asset itself. So we'd be able to say from that whether you know, there was any aids and adaptations required for a doorway, because we'll be able to tell you the width. But that is, we're focusing more on the asset itself, you know, the housing side of it in terms of the residents themselves. Is not my you know, not my area of expertise, and you know, it's something that can, you know, it can change overnight, and I don't necessarily know. We've got, you know, my colleague Becky Salmon working on that area, but I'm more seeing this as, you know, the work we're doing is a tool to allow others to do their work more quickly and effectively. It's more of a back office function. You know, if someone wants to know, well, is that flat, you know, suitable for this particular resident? You know, they don't need to go get a surveyor out to look at it. They can go onto the system and see, yeah, it's got, you know, that door width, or it's got, you know, LD1 fire detection, or whatever it might be that they feel is necessary. Yes, it doesn't have it, or yes, it does have it. No, it doesn't have it. You know, that information is there so that we can make, it's that kind of, you know, rapid, decisive decision making.
So we've also had another question, which I think is from a Fusion supplier, Millwood, but I suppose it's relevant to any particular supplier if they have their own, as they do, their own data collection tool, and it's really the question about compatibility with their tool and how then that integrates, how the software will integrate with different systems.
So I think, you know, what we're working on the kind of premise at the moment that we would want to be able to give a contractor a spreadsheet and they would fill it out and return it to us, and we would just simply upload that into our system. You know, certainly we're working on, you know, apps ourselves, you know, for our building safety managers, etc., to capture data. But as I said, we want to be flexible. You know, we don't want to not be able to work with an excellent contractor because, you know, they have a specific system that you know, doesn't link well with ours. You know, so I think Excel is perfectly good for what it does. You know, it's a great repository for information. It's very accessible, you know, very easy to use, and so we're kind of, as I said earlier, we're trying to be flexible and work with stakeholders to understand what works with them, because if it doesn't work for them, then actually it doesn't work for us.
And do you think, just on that, do you think there'll come a time where you end up with wanting to work more closely with your supply chain and going through maybe a program of supply development where you're training them in the platform, or you're giving them the tools, so you haven't got to worry about these old things where data's stuck behind firewalls? Actually, you're sort of saying, go down the road of, well, here's our systems, we want you to use our systems, and we'll train you in those.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I would see it that at some point in the future, you know, we would be giving them access, they would be uploading, we would have some kind of you know, quality control process on our side, check of that information, and then upload it into our system. That's how I would see it be, you know, where we are just, you know, they're doing it all on our system, and we just have a little bit of control to kind of sense check and make sure it's all okay.
And I guess with my procurement pattern, I sort of like that. I like you know, our members that have their own data and take that ownership for it. But then secondly, that you become vendor neutral. You know, the whole of the market's your oyster then, because you can sort of say, well, you're not specifying, oh, we need a contractor that uses this software. You're sort of saying, we need a software that a contractor or a supplier or consultant that's willing to work with us, and it's more around that willingness to adapt processes and use your systems, rather than someone that said, we need to build these big, expensive, clunky, broken interfaces that always kick out errors and have data problems. So I think it's got to be a way forward. I do see some of the suppliers will probably come along and say, well, we've already invested in our software and or our ISO processes are built around that. It's never a panacea to sort of use a client system, but it certainly can have its advantages for members, I think.
Yeah,
I just, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Phil, you know, I completely agree, and you know, different people work in different ways, and you know, that's all I was trying to say earlier, again, with the kind of different stakeholders and being flexible.
And just picking up that stakeholder point again in the webinars, both sets of webinars that we had before on Tuesday and Wednesday, that there was discussion around the issue of sharing information with stakeholders. For example, the fire service being number one in terms of information about property. Again, how do you intend to be able to make the information available to the fire service? And again, you know, one organisation on from Live Group yesterday, they are just dealing with one fire service. Clearly, an organisation like Clarion is dealing well throughout the UK, and therefore I don't know how many fire services there are. But again, how are you intending to sort of share that information with them? So again, from that fire safety perspective, they know what's in, they know what's coming, so to speak.
Yeah, so I think we've got a number of certainly colleagues, especially who work very closely with the fire service, and in a number of different areas. And we've tried doing a number of different things. Displays, signs at our buildings to set out, number of floors, hose lengths, simple, hard to vandalize things that they can see immediately on attendance to buildings. I mean, I would say first and foremost, the work we're doing here should mean there's less for them to pick up on, and there's less risk of them having to attend site, and less risk when they do, if it is an emergency, and that being our thought first and foremost. But we're currently taking some of the architectural models we have there and turning into floor plans, because obviously that works a lot better for some people in terms of what they're able to access and view and what they're used to using, etc. So we will again try to work with the needs of others, within reason and within what we're able to do ourselves. But certainly we know that different stakeholders need different things, and I think we are, when we're looking at data, it's trying to provide in an easy form, accurate, accessible. But those are the kind of things we're looking at. So I think certainly the engagement that I've had and colleagues mostly have with the fire services or the various fire services are pretty good. And certainly I think when if they can see that you know what you're talking about, and you can provide them with answers in a kind of sensible and easy format, then they're quite good to deal with.
I mean, I think interesting, having sort of been through a couple of days with his webinars and hearing Nick Coombs earlier in the week, and one of the things that came up was consistency across the country, and I think that's maybe the point Andrew was getting at there. And I look at the model, the 4D stuff, and I think, actually, do you know what? It doesn't matter what information the fire service want or what format they're in. As a landlord, you're in a position where you can say, well, we can give you that. I think the challenge is actually back to the fire service, for them to actually be quite specific around what information do they want, in what format, how's that transmitted, kept up to date, but across the country in a consistent way, so that actually it doesn't matter, Clarion, you're doing some relatively bespoke software, but it doesn't matter what technology platform, what information you've got, actually how's that provided, what format, and see some of that safety case stuff, the regulator's going to be wanting regular information, the detail of those standards, and there are other projects in the sector at the minute. So Oscar, looking at open information standards and things like that. There's definitely more work to do to get to the point where it's a bit of pin the tail on the donkey. It's a bit of second guessing right now, and I think it will come. So I can imagine Jack and the team, you're there sort of, you're collecting everything you think is right, but you've got to develop a system that says, well, there might be some of the new requirements that come down the road, but I'm sure you've built something that's flexible and adaptive enough that can do that at that point. But unless the authorities, the regulators are precise and clear, provide those specifications and guidance, I guess we're all a bit of wait and see. So
yeah, and just linked to that, Jack, in terms of, again, I wasn't quite clear, and I may just have missed it. Is the priority on the higher rise, the higher risk property, and do you then intend to roll it out through the entire stock? Is that the journey that you're hoping to make? Because again, the example of the the light being out, that you know, that could be on a low-rise estate in Nottingham as much as it could be in a high-rise building in Barking or wherever.
Yeah, so I mean, I think personally, yes, that's the way I would see it. You know, I just think that what we're trying to do is manage assets, you know, and these happen to be fire safety assets, but it could be anything. That being said, you know, it obviously requires greater understanding in places, better systems, you know, more process and procedure that might make it prohibitive in other places. You know, I think it wouldn't. I think you know, you're likely to get, you know, a lot of kind of reduced operational costs by you know, really understanding and having access to that information. But as I said before, you know, a bit like you were saying there, Phil, whether, you know, you're gathering the right information. You know, I'm wrong on a regular basis. It can be wrong on these ones. So, you know, we'll see what happens. You know, you can certainly, you know, have a vision that you think will work. But there can be, you know, changes, whether it's a Grenfell type event or whether it's, you know, other priorities in the business that can impact on what exactly happens.
I think just adding to that, I think interesting, I go back 15, 20 years. I think of a large social landlord in the north of England, and they employ their own architect. I don't know any social landlords that employ architects at this point in time. It was interesting to see you'd taken on a BIM person. I think, you know, they say in other industries that information is gold, and absolutely in housing. How do you compete? How do you keep doing your development programs? You've got to get the asset, and you've got to get it at cost, and that asset data. I think there's a skills gap in the sector. I think there's lots of organisations that have got some really knowledgeable technical surveyors, but when it comes to some of the IT skills, it's limited. The business analyst skills, the data analyst skills, and I think it's a sector-wide problem, and those skills country are in short supply. And so I do think organisations need to look at investing in training in their staff and looking at where you've got transferable skills and those people that can do some of this stuff, because that information challenge, it certainly turns from in the past, think of, you know, we got rid of all the architects, and we just about might have a GIS office there, and it's not really adding huge amounts of value to something that is a source of value in future, and becomes a core competence for landlords that want to be able to demonstrate to, you know, lenders that they know what they're doing, to regulators that they're compliant. So I think there's a direction of travel here, but my thoughts on it is around investment in training. So, yeah.
I think as well, it's, you know, talking about those kind of you know, the smartphone almost, if you like, unintended benefits, where, you know, we're creating jobs that are perhaps more interesting, you know, and will attract a different type of candidate into the organisation that we wouldn't necessarily be able to get otherwise. You know, if you think, you know, a generation of children growing up playing Minecraft or whatever it might be, you know, where people might currently, you know, around the organisation be happy dealing with 2D floor plans, you know, it might be that there's quite a quick transition to that no longer being the case. You know, and I think, you know, attracting talent might be one of the benefits of this, but again, might be wrong, it might not be.
And I think the other bit is positioning that software. You know, I talked about the scanning with the smartphone. Actually, some it might be de-skilling, some decomplexing some of this technology to make it accessible. You know, I think of my 8-year-old nephews playing Minecraft non-stop and think, okay, they can probably get it, but they're not mature enough to be managing risks. And I certainly think, some of the newer business software tools, some of the analytical tools where, in the olden days, you had to commission someone in IT to write a report out of the database, to wait a week to come back and tell you how many properties you've got. And nowadays, with our software platforms, we can just drag and drop a few fields and it can give you the answer to the question. And I think the tools are getting there. I think their staff will get there, but I think there's also actually we don't need our staff to write SQL. Actually, what we need them to be able to do is identify and specify the information they need and give them the tools to access it. And I think there's certainly a narrowing of that gap, but I still think there are definitely training needs as well. So.
Excellent. Well, we could probably talk all afternoon, but I am conscious of time and therefore conscious that the audience and so on of other things to do. So I'm going to draw the discussion to a close and just by thanking Jack, very insightful presentation, and we wish you continued luck with 4D and the project. And I'm sure that you'll probably be right a majority of the time by the sound of it. And a big thank you again to Phil for his input. We did have a question about somebody who came in late. So yes, this session is recorded and will be uploaded onto the Fusion21 website. We may not be able, because of the interactivity, to put Jack's slides there, but we can have Jack and I have a discussion about that. I'm not sure if the video we'll be able to get, but we'll find a solution. But definitely the presentation will be on the website. A final reminder that we have the launch of the building safety and compliance framework next week. So if you haven't done so already, please again visit the Fusion21 website and sign up for that. So yeah, a final thank you again to the panel, and a final thank you to you, the audience. I hope you found today as useful as I, and as ever, have a great rest of the afternoon. Stay safe and hope to see you all soon. Bye now.